By the way, I came across an amazing tshuva from the Satmar Rebbe. This is really an ingenious thought, an amazing thought, based on Rav Daniel and he quotes the Yaris Tavash. I said it over this morning to somebody. The guy said, "Did you ever see the Satmar Rebbe?" I said, "Not recently, no." Right? He said, when he was 15 years old, like 60 years ago, somebody snuck him into Satmar Beis Medrash on Simchas Torah, and he saw the face of the Satmar Rebbe. He said it was the only time in his life he saw the Shekhinah. That's what he told me. This is what somebody told me today. In any event, listen to what he says. Techeles is produced from a non-kosher aquatic creature. There's a rule in halacha. You're only allowed to use a dvar mitzvah if it's made from something that you're allowed to eat. For example, tefillin. It says, "Alman tia teres Hashem beficha." We darshan min mutter beficha. You can only make it from an animal that it's mutter to eat. So there's a rule that a dvar mitzvah has to come from something that you're allowed to eat. So how could you make techeles from chilazon? Chilazon is a treifa, aquatic creature. On a different note, on God's kisei hakavod, you ever notice the fact that there's some interesting creatures on God's throne of glory? What's on God's throne of glory? You have an eagle, you have a lion. They're not kosher. The lions are not kosher. Not even the ones in Detroit. No lions are kosher. The eagles are not kosher either. What? Okay, you're hopping on the job. Very good. Right? So, that's l'havin davar mitash davar, right? So they're not. So what are they doing on the kisei hakavod? What are they doing on the kisei hakavod? Says Rav Daniel on God's kisei hakavod, there's no problem, because to God He sees the whole world as one. He glances at everything as one. It's hakol b'skira achas. So Maui, it's on his kisei hakavod, or it's on the ocean floor. So that's why you could have non-kosher animals on God's throne of glory. But a Jew, when he's performing mitzvahs, cannot perform a mitzvah with something that is what? Treif. Says the Satmar Rebbe. But the mitzvah of techeles is different. Why? Because what's the purpose of techeles? Techeles looks like the sea. The sea looks like the heavens. The heavens looks like the kisei hakavod. So the purpose of techeles is to imagine yourself standing before the kisei hakavod. But the kisei hakavod, you're allowed to have a davar tameh. That's why the techeles is the only dvar mitzvah that you're allowed to have a dvar tameh. That's the svar of the Satmar Rebbe. Very interesting. Very creative, ingenious svar. And therefore he says, the Arizal says there's a Kabbalistic reason why we don't have techeles today. Says the Satmar Rebbe, there's more than a Kabbalistic reason. There's a revealed reason. The purpose of techeles is to remind you of the sea. The sea reminds you of the heavens. You know what the Gemara says in Brachas and Daf Nun Tes? Miyam shechar beis hamikdash, the sky is never blue anymore. The sky is never perfectly blue. So if the sky is never perfectly blue, what's the purpose of wearing techeles to remind you of the sea? The sea is not going to remind you of the sky. You have no idea what the sky looks like anymore. So therefore, if the sky is not blue, therefore it is only reasonable that the whole techeles is obsolete. It cannot serve its function. The whole function of techeles is to remind you of the color of the sky. But we don't have the tayar harakia, says the Gemara in Brachos. And even more than that, if the purpose of techeles, he says, is to remind you of the connection between heaven and earth. Where was the main location on earth that connected Shamayim Ba'aretz? This is Shara Shara, the Beis HaMikdash. If you don't have a Beis HaMikdash, you don't need techeles. Techeles is obsolete. And therefore, says the Satmar Rebbe, there's not just a Kabbalistic reason why we don't have techeles. There's a very logical, reasonable reason, practical reason. The purpose of techeles is to remind you of the connection of Shamayim Ba'aretz. That was created through the Beis HaMikdash. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash. We don't have the Tayar HaRakia. And therefore, he writes, we no longer have techeles. He's explaining the Arizal is saying Kabbalistic. I don't know if I should say this. One of the more ironic things I've seen, says the Satmar Rebbe, why were the Jews so happy when they saw Mordechai wearing the techeles? It says, right? It says, Shoshanas Yaakov Tzahala V'Samecha. Yeah? Listen to this. V'roi Samyacha Techeles Mordechai. Until this period of time, The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. That means they didn't have techeles. When they saw Mordechai wearing the techeles, that gave them the hope that the Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt. And it must be that this is Aschalta de Geulta, says the Satmar Rebbe. Now, I don't think he was going that way. Right? But he says, techeles are the first signs of the coming of Mashiach. And that's why the Jews were so happy when they saw Mordechai wearing the techeles. Because again, like the Arizal says, that somehow there's a link between the wearing of techeles and the Binyan Beis Hamikdash. And then finally,